Let's talk right now about Boris Johnson facing that partygate investigation today. He's going to be appearing before the Privileges Committee in the House of Commons. It's made up by 7 MPs, 4 of whom are Tories. He's, though, said he believes this is an unfair, biased inquiry into whether or not he misled Parliament over those lockdown parties at Number 10. Now, he's already admitted in his defence dossier yesterday that he did mislead Parliament. However, he says he did not do so deliberately and he did not do so recklessly. Benedict Spence is going to be listening intently to what my next guest has to say. I'd love to get your thoughts on what Mark Jenkinson has to say. He's Conservative MP for Workington and joins us right now. Good morning to you, Mark.
Good morning, Julia.
Very much appreciate you joining me. We're delighted you are joining us because I always want my audience to hear all sides of a story and not just me pontificating on it. You'll know I feel very strongly about this. I still shake with anger whenever this story is in the news. I will be shouting at the TV all afternoon, this afternoon. But you've been backing Boris Johnson throughout this. Do you think that he has been treated unfairly and this is a biased committee investigating him? What's your stand on this?
Well, look, I think there are questions that we can ask around the chair of the committee. For example, the previous chair of the committee recused himself because to carry on would have imputed unfairness in the process. And the current chair of the committee has made similar statements pronouncing Boris Johnson's guilt prior to any investigation, prior to her even taking the chair. So I think there are, I'm not about to start throwing accusations around the committee, but the chair in particular, I think, has questions.
This is Harriet Harman. She's former deputy leader of the Labour Party. It is a committee, though, that has a majority of Tory members on it.
It is, but I think we've also got to look at the fact that the goalposts keep moving. So the committees, previously the committees always looked at contempt of Parliament as being deliberately misleading Parliament. Ministers make, and MPs, of course, make statements that are incorrect quite regularly. And the important thing is that they come back and correct the record at the earliest possible opportunity, which is exactly what Boris Johnson did. He maintains that what he said was correct to the best of his knowledge at the time. He instigated the Sue Gray report, following a Met Police investigation report. And then, of course, the day the Sue Gray report was published, he came and corrected the record. Of course, the Met Police looked in detail at all of these events and fined him for attendance at one, which was when he was presented with a birthday cake. The idea that people knew or thought that was outside the rules when it was actively briefed to the Times and no one batted an eyelid for over 18 months, I think that's for the birds. Obviously, all of the photographs in the evidence pack were not taken surreptitiously. They were taken by an official Number 10 photographer. So obviously people believed that what they were doing was within the rules at the time. I think Boris's evidence is quite clear about the difference between guidance and the rules.
Guidance and rules, yeah, unfortunately that guidance and rules difference, guidance, rules, laws, that wasn't made very clear to the rest of us. I was working in an office through much of that time. It was made very clear to me that those were rules that had to be followed. And it was very clear to me there was no workplace exemption. I wasn't making the laws, but I was reporting on them and I was following those statements. When there were sort of, for instance, 30 people, 100 invited, but 30 people invited to bring your own booze party in the garden of Number 10. That party happened on the evening, just half an hour after one of the government ministers, Oliver Dowden, had stood in the Downing Street press briefing room telling people you could not have more than one other person in your garden, even in your garden. So, I mean, literally one person over there saying one thing and then the entire Number 10 staff doing something different does suggest that if people didn't know this was against the rules, they clearly didn't know what the rules were, and given that they were playing a big role in those rules being imposed on the rest of us, I mean, again, the defence is you either knowingly broke the rules or you were totally and utterly incompetent and stupid and unaware of the rules. I'm not sure either is a great defence, but that seems to be what Boris Johnson is saying. Look, he says, look, I took advice. No one told me what we were doing was against the rules. I had no idea that this was going on. I mean, his defence has changed over the months. First of all, he had no idea. Then he said, the guidance was all followed, and that he's been assured that there were no parties and that no COVID rules were broken. But now he's saying, yes, well, he did mislead Parliament then, but not deliberately and not recklessly. But his story has changed repeatedly, hasn't it?
No, I mean, at every stage, he has set out what is being told by people with knowledge. He's corrected the record when that's been found to be incorrect.
6 months later. It was 6 months later he corrected the record.
Yes, but 6 months because there was a Met Police investigation and there was a Sue Gray and the Sue Gray report. And the day the Sue Gray report was published with all of that evidence of what had went on and who was where, that was the day the record was corrected, when everything came to light. So I think the earliest possible opportunity is the key point here, and that was the earliest possible opportunity. But I would just say on all of those events, on that event that you mentioned, the Met Police have investigated and fined Boris Johnson for one event, which wasn't that one. It was the one where he was presented with a birthday cake in the cabinet room, and which was briefed actively to the press.
I understand. You've made that point. And look, I've always felt that was the least egregious offence among them. And I've always thought it was quite clear that it was deliberately chosen by Sue Gray at the time, who I think pulled her punches, to only have pictures of that event when we know there were lots of other very, very drunken events. Plenty of witnesses. No. Plenty of witnesses have said
Boris Johnson wasn't at those events.
He was at some of those events.
And the nature of the events, as is clear in the fourth report of the committee, from the evidence from the Met Police, the nature of the events changed
after he left.
After he left.
The key thing is, it wasn't a nature of events that was allowed. There was no ruling. There was no press conference at Downing Street saying you can all get together with people you've been working with all day as long as you don't get too drunk and no one vomits in the corner. That wasn't what the law. That wasn't what the rules were. I'm afraid.
What we're dealing with is what Boris Johnson did or didn't do. I think that's quite clear.
We're also talking about what he knew. Some of these parties were so loud that the police officer at the front of Number 10 could hear them. Other people could hear them. We had a visit from the Privileges Committee members to Number 10 to show that actually there was a clear line of sight between some of the rooms where the parties were taking place, where Boris Johnson attended, and Boris Johnson's office. There wasn't even a proper investigation into the party is alleged to have taken place in his own flat, which wouldn't have had this claimed workplace exemption. There was no workplace exemption. He was at parties. He did attend events that were against the rules. We know that because more than 100 people in his office were fined for attending those events, various different events. So that's beyond doubt. The question is whether it's not even whether he misled Parliament. We know he misled Parliament. The question is whether he did it deliberately or recklessly. He's asking us to believe, and you clearly accept his argument, and I want to know why you accept his argument, that he couldn't possibly have known, as the man who announced many of these rules, who imposed these rules on people in their workplaces, in their homes, in care homes, in everywhere else in the world, in the country, he could not possibly have known that getting a load of people together with bottles of wine and sandwiches was against the rules. I knew it was against the rules. Virtually every single person in the country knew it was against the rules. It's clear from some of the evidence that we've seen that many of his staff knew it was against the rules, but he somehow, as the Prime Minister, didn't. Why do you believe him when he says that?
So I think what it needs is context. So context of the situation we were in at the time, and the situation that Number 10 were in, dealing, people there most of 18 hours a day plus, dealing with a global pandemic and our response to that pandemic, worried about the state of the country. You then got people who were intimately involved in crafting the guidance, so know that guidance inside out, guidance as opposed to rules. So knowing that, for example, the guidance wanted social distancing where possible. Knowing the context of Number 10, I don't know if you've ever been injured.
Yes.
You've seen it's a rabbit warren of small rooms and corridors, and they had all sorts of measures in place, one-way systems.
No. They didn't wear masks. They didn't obey one-way systems, but they put our kids in masks and one-way systems, didn't they?
These people were working together all day, every day.
Like lots of people had to do.
To move from your desk to another room to say goodbye to a colleague who's working with you
banned under the rules. It was banned under the rules. We had a member of our team leave, and it was banned under the rules to have any leaving party.
We've had a Met Police investigation that found, obviously, that it wasn't banned under the rules. That's quite clear. I think that's what we need to get back to.
We've had more than 100 people fined for attending a lot of these events. People left their jobs because they attended these events. Boris Johnson still says he didn't do anything wrong. Sorry, Gov, I had no idea. Do you think that most people in the country believe that Boris Johnson had no idea that he was breaking the law?
So I think that there are a lot of people who are very, very angry, who followed the rules meticulously and see that there were some really egregious breaches of the rules in number 10, for which people were fined. I think people are very, very angry about the lockdown and various other things. Different people are angry about really very different things. And a lot of that is absolutely right. The things that I saw that happened in number 10 the night before Prince Philip's funeral, for example, really made me angry as well. But what we've got to do is not conflate those things that went on when Boris Johnson wasn't involved and wasn't there, and those that went on when he was, that he would have known about and did know about, but have been investigated by the Met Police, that have been investigated at length by Sue Gray, and all of that is on the record.
Okay.
I think what we've got to be careful of is that the committee rewriting the rules on misleading Parliament, because every one of us as elected MPs then needs to worry about misleading unintentionally, which can happen to any single one of us. I mean, I'm sure it happens to...
And it doesn't take 6 months to correct the record. Just finally, if he does get a 10... if he is found to be guilty, in fact, it's not a court of law by the Privileges Committee, if we do actually see a suspension of more than 10 days, and again, we are talking about this stuff happening months down the line, if there were a recall to Parliament, do you think he'd win the by-election? Do you think he still has a future in politics, or is this his career over?
Well, I don't want to prejudge what the committee will or won't do, or how the House might treat that decision. But, if you're asking me if Boris Johnson stood in a by-election tomorrow in his current seat, would he win it? I think he would. I hope that that's not where we end up, because I think it would be an egregious waste of time and money and effort from a lot of people when we've got many other things that we should be concerned about, not least today's news on continued rise in inflation.
Indeed. All right, Mark Jenkinson, I really appreciate you coming on. Thank you so much for joining us on Total MP for Workington.